So thanks everybody for being tonight. This has been a long time coming. I think it's been over just over a year now. We applied for the funding for online recreational master plan. We've now taken a step. We've hired time to start doing with us, and we're going to hand that over. We're going to hand over to a second to sort of review what was the online recreational master plan. So good last. Hopefully, the end of the year, and maybe I'm going to. I am going to do it. Hopefully, we'll see as it goes. I'm Rob the next big the planning board. If they're fair, oh my God, yes, solutions. Yeah, also one of the so go ahead, Ryan. So my name's Ryan Morrison. With me today is Allison Wolf and on. We're excited to have the opportunity to help the community with the planning opportunity. As we've been mentioned today, what I'm trying to do is just figure out the community what we're trying to accomplish as part of this process. Kind of let you look at what our process looks like and so get some feedback from the community. Maybe there's some things we haven't talked about that we want to look at, or maybe there's some things we thought we were going to look at and we don't need to look at. So we just want to get some feedback from everybody, introduction to the process. This process will be iterative and it will depend a lot on community feedback. So you'll hear me say a couple times during this presentation, we'll be reaching out to folks during this process to get no one knows these facilities and fields better than you do. Like I can't come in here and know how you use them without your input. So you guys' input will be paramount in helping this master plan grow and become something useful for the community. And so we'll get started and kind of show the processes. Just one other quick thing is, I'm just curious. There was a lot of stakeholders who are here. Is is there any good point if you would not if you represent a youth sport team and it wasn't mentioned before, not having any so this is a community oriented plan. So this involves the community sort of the youth club. So just to let you guys know a little bit about ourselves. So I think so something I said that wasn't it. No. I'm talking a little bit about Southside and Bond. We're a multidisciplinary firm throughout the Northeast. We're in all the way from New York to New Hampshire. We have a select group that does specialize in athletic field and recreation projects. Some of those key people are on this project team. You'll see a lot on some of the South Group are front facing folks. As part of this group, we also have Davey Amari, Karen Rooney, Andrew Hovey, and Katie Weaver. A lot of different specialties that will help us implement this project. For example, Sharon Rooney is a principal planner with our group. We send comprehensive plans and master planning efforts throughout the Northeast. A technical perspective, so I will address some of the community engagement pieces when we go to survey the community, when we go to ask for another meeting at some point where we'll ask feedback from the community, government some feedback there. I know these are less than effective designers. He's going to get this put together some conceptual plans, some plans with my candy behind it once we decide what we want to do so that we can help sell this master plan to the community. I'm going to continue Weaver. One of the things we'll do on this project is we'll GIS map all of your commercial facilities, right? I'm going to GIS map, show you an example of that later. But we're just not understand what the community has for different facilities, each park. Is there walkways, is there buildings, is there fields? It's a shifting possibility before. And then we'll go confirm in the field and look at these facilities and kind of probably still discussion. First, I want to find what we think the townwide recreational master plan is, and again, that's a little bit about what we're here for. But we know we think the townwide recreational master plan is, but maybe there's other elements here that we want to understand or the community wants to understand. I was in project completion timeline, where we are in that process, we're very early in the process. Just having a kickoff meeting about a month ago, and then kicking it off in the public now. We'll talk about community engagement opportunities, and then schedule next steps. So The master plan, the idea behind the master plan is one, I think it's a dynamic thing. It needs to update itself along the way. What we're trying to do is provide a roadmap for the future of Milton for how they can improve the recreational facilities. Sometimes these recreational improvements that are needed for communities, especially older communities, we don't understand if you just made a land. Okay, if you need, I'm just gonna use this as an example. If we need more baseball fields, we can expand baseball fields, right? But how does that affect soccer? So it needs to be done in a multi-phase approach. So the point behind a master plan is to understand what the facilities are, come up with what you need to do to improve those facilities to meet the community's needs, and then come up with a phased approach that's reasonable for each community. That looks different for everyone. Um, Another thing is understanding community information groups, right? So when we get some feedback from the community, one of the things we'll be asking for is our sports growing, it's increasing in volume. Do we think there's a sport that's not being used for? Whereas there been some noise about sport that would like so understanding some of those community information games also to you, if anybody wants to ask questions during it, I would totally find the best stopping me and do you want me to go through this? And you get me around this. So, if anyone has a question or anything, feel free to feel free to raise your hand. The master plan will develop in three key phases. We'll put together a facilities assessment report. Facilities assessment report will go to each one of these facilities. I personally will stop in at these facilities. I'll look at each one of the fields to make sure they're meeting requirements for clarity. Is there setback requirements? Is the fencing in good shape? Are the dugouts accessible? Things of that nature. We'll look at target is the being to the point where no longer be repaired or doesn't have to be replaced. What type of material is the floor? Is the surface insufficient in the floor? Is the netting associated with it in good standing or at the end of its useful lifespan? We'll look at things like basketball courts. Do the hoops meet safety concerns? Is there great padding or the right setback to the post? Or typically the end line where somebody could get injured. We'll look at setback for fencing if it's being provided on one of the things that's relative to it is does the field have drainage? Another one that usually comes up in some reporting from the community because you can't see the field and all the different conditions it may throughout the year. So we scan the community and some of the commissioners that this field stays flooded for a long period of time. It doesn't rain really, but um, we'll ask about usage, we'll try to take look at wear patterns and where we can wear patterns, but we'll only be viewing them in the center pattern. So we'll maybe a football pattern with center logo worn out of the field may not present to us. And so we'll want to understand how that field wears throughout the year. And what the repair strategies maybe that you've been using to keep those fields adequate for the time being. So if we do our craft facilities assessment report, we'll analyze calculations and capacity utilization. We'll give some preliminary recommendations for improving and how we expand that. We'll then provide that engagement system. I think some of these things we'll have to determine as we get into this process. When the right time is to engage the public as we work through this. Once we do get some feedback about a preliminary improvement strategy, we'll put together a report that kind of those strategies and improvements, and we'll provide a draft, which will go to the board first, and then to the public for review. After the draft is reviewed by the public, we'll get feedback, finalize that report, and then that become the next plan for the timeline. So right now we're currently in the research and discovery process. Currently we've uploaded a bunch of previous recreational plans and comprehensive plans out, manage that stuff. So we're kind of reviewing what some of the previous plans had in them, make sure we're not stepping on an old plan or we're not incorporating something from that plan. We're also going to schedule our field assessments in the upcoming month, a couple of weeks probably actually at this point. To walk the facilities with town staff and kind of understand what's next. The next will happen basically from now until probably September. In September and throughout the field, we'll start engaging the community on what our initial findings were. As I talked about, community engagement is going to have multiple groups to it. We're going to engage the youth athletic groups on a one-on-one basis. We'll have um, community engagement in a public perspective for another 2 meetings. So we complete the community engagement piece. We'll wrap up our analysis of all the conditions. And we'll be probably through the October, November timeframe, October timeframe, to face for our visual recommendations for the November through December. One of the things I had kind of warned the board about this is the weapons and up in December, many people started holidays in December. What we found in the past is that if we're looking for community feedback, we may want to give this thing a little bit more time in our leeway, so that we're going to it's the holiday time, it's like, so we have done this really nice community basis is where we think this thing should be. Curious, ready for the previous special games. Here again, our previous plans, and so it's this updated on. It's yellows, you know, in space. That's the tiny idea of space. 90. That's what we had. That's a little bit different. Where it doesn't have anything like specific details. There's not a that's not a great state where it's the able things to be simply and to be honest, it's way over. It's really like really it's for one. It's just like it's like it. You you do that. I'm going to a little bit about that. Yeah, good. I'm going to do one every 10 years. Milton, then what was in that? Only if you're thinking this term, using it, but I always think of this plans as more like a passive recreation and then this townwide master plan, comprehensive master plan combines a little bit of a passive, a little bit of active recreation to kind of just around see. Well, this won't necessarily this won't focus on like that's for it and anything else in Milton and also we won't necessarily touch that. This will focus on specific groups in our I don't think it's ever been done. This is not I don't think this level so we can find uncounted in communities. And I do want to stress that like a lot of communities have previously they built the park, someone donated the land for a lot of years, became aged out, and at the same time that aged out, another park got donated. So they've kind of like mandated on the parks together, and then it becomes a time when that's I think it's probably covered a lot of this already, but the research discovery off today is step one is do a town master plan kickoff. And then we'll start our site visits to the facilities early in August. So one of the things we want to do tonight is identify any key stakeholders we may not have heard of enough. So if there's someone here that, hey, I wasn't asked to be part of the plan, or hey, we've got these folks over here, we're something we want to hear about tonight. So we'll just explain our goals and objectives, and then we'll just start finding initiatives, studies, and open space building, one of those things we'll try and implement everything in order to see with conflicts. We're trying to understand what's in there and documentation and data collection, review mapping, local planning documents, anything regarding the parks that have previously been put together. We already talked about you guys are making some improvements on parks. We want to understand what improvements may be coming down the road, so that we make sure we don't want to suggest a field that's moved if you've just picked up hasn't been anything like so. Assess talents and practices for maintenance operations and programming. This is an important kind of thing to understand for us. Maintenance is one of those things where, even if you had a brand new field, if you can't maintain it, just because of something levels or whatever, it's really tough to keep that except for a long period of time. And if the fields look really nice, but you're inversely, the fields look really nice, your maintenance crew is putting a lot of effort into it, it may need to be rebuilt just so you don't feel so much conforming to it at all. One of the examples I've used for this is There's a community I won't name, but they had a football field. It's not that far from here, and they were sodding it twice a year during their football season, just so that they could keep the football team on it. And they were doing that every year, twice a year. And so, like, each time they sodded the field, that was $50, $60 and so if they're coming for that little effort, yes, the field looks really good. But that's an unreasonable level of effort for really enough to be. So we want to understand what the purposes are, is there is it really good to put with them so that it works with the community and doesn't put anything or to maintain it. We also want to analyze the housing population trends. Is the community growing? Is the community aging? What might that mean for recreational facilities? Who's picking up something that's going to take off? Something that's coming back to result in something. It's a more every day. And so we want to buy systems, right? We want to understand when things are going and go all one way or all the other way. So we can balance that.
Can I ask a question? Coming from what's the relationship between the town and the Cunningham it's private? It's even though they you use stuff.
Relationship.
So you wouldn't be reviewing it again. Oh, you really? I thought.
It was just like random too. So I think looking so when we have the academy, we have some of these institutions that we do have access to. We want to involve at least the discussions with this plan because we know we're so limited with what we do. So building communities from us. He also well, just been very, very good to so we have been getting this. So it's also kind of important to know where they may be going with their facilities, right? Like they may have a plan if there's a tennis court or a baseball field we're using it. Hey, we're changing that to something. You're like, oh, I didn't know that. Now I need a baseball field. I need a baseball field. So it's important to understand what their planning looks like in the next 10 years so that you guys can plan. Make sure you're being able to services maybe. We'll do recreational data collections. One of the things I talked about. We're gonna do one-on-one meetings with recreational groups, minorities, stakeholders, specific, stakeholders. In those one-on-one meetings, we're going to want to discuss the experiences each one of those groups are having, challenges they may have, some of the typical things that come up in this kind of form. It's just, what are we having a problem with scheduling? You may have 3 baseball teams that need a field space at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, and you only have 1 field available to you. One's for the high school, and so we want to understand those relationships, and it's really helpful when we can hear, we're short on field spaces, we're only short on field spaces. Maybe sometimes a lot of rectangular sports are in the fall, so we're only short on field spaces in the fall. And that allows us to kind of better understand how we overlap the baseball use and a rectangular use so that in the fall you have flexibility for the rectangular use, and in the summer you can use it for baseball. Not saying that applies to this community, just trying to give you some examples of what we're planning to do. We want to document usage patterns and constraints. I know that now has a scheduling, but I think we'll be able to get some data from instead of from the fields and schedule. One field schedule. Typically what we find is this one field that's become going to relevant, so a lot of people stuff started getting nobody plays on it. And it's listed in the inventory, but it's not really an inventory because something's wrong with the field, whether it's something just falling over or we literally had keys ball in the middle of the field and I can't play there anymore rather than cut down the meter. So we want to understand, are all the field being used for the next time? And if not, when we reallocate uses in the fields. We want something to go with the students in the community, this field space, work space, not technology, in town, we can use direct perspectives. We previously discussed doing some GIS data collection. We do this in 2 different ways. One, we'll look at each individual report. besides discussing with the inventory for each one of those parks there. Anything we want to identify when we map each one of those communities, some can use space may already the property and trying to expand facilities at those space. And in doing so, we'll want to look at environmental concerns. Are there maintenance nearby use of floodplains that may cause a restriction? Typically, what we find on a recreational facility is if the land's not developed, it's probably for a reason. But every once in a while, we say, oh my god, this land developed. If you need to expand facilities, um, eventually we'll map sorts within the community, townwide map. Slips and stuff understand if there's anything that's in the community. When that we do have parks, we want to make sure that you know that you can be walked. We want to be for that as bad. I'm saying necessarily we'll say we made a little park there. But you guys know we don't do it this way. Think that's an example of a community that wanted us to map their facilities. It's a little bit different. That's really technique from here. But what we're doing in this particular map is we're mapping each one of the areas of facilities and I think that's not on this different um that's those parameters for recreational uses in here. One of the things we're able to identify by able to mapping what we had previously aligned was we could talk to them about how they can reorient these fields so that they can serve different uses throughout the season. Another thing they were struggling with is where within the community. So, some people want to eliminate out certain areas. And rather than leaving fields in a certain place, we're able to talk to them about how do you rotate your fields once a month or once every 2 months so that you don't wear those same areas. And we're able to get questions to review some of those languages. In addition, we'll leave things to the advice for students if you have smaller things that you have. Phase two is community engagement. We'll talk about we're going to two in-person meetings and one virtual community meeting. Like I said, we'll talk about what those look like and we're going to announce those meetings on the national page. We'll we'll try to get to much community feedback from those meetings as possible. So we'd like to, with our commission's approvals, I think the next meeting really should be after we kind of have some thoughts about what our proposed improvements are. It's that to you guys, if you guys are on board, bring the community back in and be able to get some feedback so that we tailor those improvements before we start doing any further design or anything like that. You've been with the town to provide on the website, any findings or anything that we come up with, we listed on that website. With the further appropriate website. Another part of our community engagement is we're gonna do a survey 1, 2, 3 survey to the community. We're gonna work on providing a bunch of not bunch, but say 10 to 15 questions that we think kind of strike a balance within the community. And so we've been able to talk to a few folks to help understand what the community's needs may be. And it may be a question about lighting, or it may be a question about pathways, or maybe a question about maintenance. Series of questions. You're gonna see some of these questions so and we're gonna ask you guys to engage in. Get some of some of things. We're gonna have engagement through knowledge and economy. To understand and those facilities can serve us. This is an example for survey one can do look like and if you realize that you guys don't really from the way that's kind of hard for you to view control now so that you guys can tell us in detail what's happening at the facilities or what you're struggling with. It should be a map for you to be able to police where things are happening and be able to give us some feedback. I don't want to be able to do on your cell phone. User friendly. We've got some community. Nelson, did I miss anything about the first survey 1, 2, 3 that we want to cover? Our analysis is kind of summarizing all the existing conditions after we've surveyed feedback. We've reached to the one-on-one conversations. We've had some community feedback. We'll we'll talk about facility evaluation. Um, I'm not going to tell them what I'm telling you right there. It's kind of a summary score for a facility. The main key items we're going to be looking at here are what are the environmental constraints, what are the geometry constraints from each individual athletic facility. It may be a court, that may be multi-purpose field, that may be a baseball or softball field. What is general site accessibility? Do I have parking spots? Is there enough parking for that particular facility? What are the pathways to get me from the parking to the athletic facility? Is there any safety concerns I see? Is there any drop-offs close to the facility? What does the support equipment look like? Is the chain link all rusted out? Falling over? Does it look like kids have been throwing the link fence for 40 years and it's feeling like it didn't? There's been swimming pools, doing that stuff to the facility. What do the dugout situation look like? We'll make our best observations. Is there drainage provided? Do I see any drainage facilities out there? Does this look like we could fit them in the community? Um, and then cycle. It's kind of understanding ways that go ahead, Bunny.
I have someone raising a hand online.
So Lisa, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? Maybe. Lisa, you're muted if you can hear us. And what am I?
Um,
I don't know. Online. Are they? It must be that new AM. Um, the other thing I could do is turn the mic on my laptop. Oh, we don't want to do that. About 3 seconds. Let's see how this sounds for them online. No, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Can I just start talking or? Yeah, it seems like that. Okay. Sorry for those of you who may not have been able to hear us before. Hopefully you can hear us now and we'll continue with the presentation. Phase 4 is our visioning process, talking about what are improvements that we want to make to the facilities, and kind of using analytics to help us with that. In the upper right-hand corner, we analyzed what available hours of field may be available versus how much it was used, and it was able to help us come in the case of this particular community that they were using basically every available hour except one field. And this was one of those communities that the field that wasn't being used because the field was unplayed. And so you may notice that some of those available times don't make not the same. Not every field will have the same available usage, depending on how it's built. Whether it's constructed will determine the facility can be played on every night, and still in good shape or have facilities, built with a little less improvements. And so you shouldn't play on it every night because it just can't keep that. Another thing that can affect a field or field's playability is whether it has lights. So you can play on that night. Send out a little bit because the fields you can play on all night is probably not a field that's going to survive the spring and summer. You're probably going to wear the just not your use. So all that will come with caveats all the time to guide them. And then we'll, after we evaluate, back to usage versus available, we'll kind of come up with where field deficits are. And I know this sounds really field heavy, but it won't be as field heavy. It's just in the process of analyzing what the community may need. Fields is going to be the most sensitive. If it's there and it's in good shape, you can use it sun up to sundown and it doesn't wear out. Or a lot of this analysis must be done on the fields to make sure after we come up with conceptuals with some potential improvements, we'll work through some and we present that to the community and the community's on board. But sorry. So just kind of that it sounds similar to back to the stakeholders because I'm seeing that So you can do all of this, and then once you go to the various folks, there's going to be people that are going to be right? So is there a sense of who these specific stakeholders are? Because there was also distancing stakeholders and reusable groups. So to be a sense of who these stakeholders are, and then specifically what we want to as stakeholders. So for instance, we always give this example of mindset. When one children who are in sports, I mean, in sports, I'm not I punch directly with the students. So in part degrees, I'm obviously all in on helping in whatever way we're going to do this, for improvements and fixing up these fields. We have more organizational schools. It's obviously going to be some words, right? Like, what are we looking for? What can we help? What can we fix? But the folks that are going to be in particular areas that are going to prioritize the state. So who do we look at first? Do we look at second? And how does that kind of help on this? So to kind of answer the initial question, we've had identified some recreational groups that we want to get information from for a lot of reasons, just because they're a significant user of the athletic fields. But we think the community is a stakeholder. So I don't think anybody from the community should be considered a stakeholder. Anybody who may use the recreation facilities, we want to hear from. And so those stakeholders, that's an particular have like outreach in those public meetings. So anyone who survey 123 is a valuable stakeholder to us to understand what the community needs around. So I mean, if you think, I if you're a local resident, you're a stakeholder. You like this, you like to know this. So looking at that, even though there is these specific stakeholder groups that in this, we want to take down. That's why the community meetings with everybody as well. Information probably getting out to the community, just so that we can also we don't know if we bring every stakeholder in here. So it's also just trying to bring whoever is an interest. Yeah. This was my last because it was mentioned so the field so there are going to be some folks who are let's say folks who are playing sports and they're fully as interested. They want more trainings, right? They want not training, but working through points and then use that space for so it's sort of right, like obviously it's going to be filled. I fully understand that. So it's going to be sort of not fine necessarily not it doesn't really get far. So I just want to make sure that they're so when you talk about what is it, I think the most so complicated response, but I think what we follow is that we're conduits for this master plan and we let the community help us decide what's the priority. And so it's response levels. When we get the survey back and we see leading results that say they want to walk to the trail, let people do that. I'm just throwing out examples. And it's not letting link to it. There's a lot of people that are reaching out to us about that. And if we get one person who says, I want a bocce ball court, we may come to the commission and say, guys, I get a response on a bocce ball court here. Does that make sense to you or does that make sense to you? So, hopefully the survey results will help. And at some point, there may be something close, but we may say, it's a master plan. It is not, we're not going to design, building anything off this spec yet. And so we may say, option 1A is to build this, option 1B is to do this. Like, my community kind of before, and he said, well, listen, we get a master plan to it. So, listen, so I want the community to we really want to put out, fitness and that's a big idea of where we can put it, right? And so that's we want to incorporate that. So want to go through a CPC and we've made a plan for that and we've looked at it. So that that's expense. That is a lot of people that are interested in this plan. And so this is the plan that's here, kind of coordinate all that. But I think getting back to like you will have individual meetings with some stakeholders, and we want to do is identify maybe one or two people in the mix from some of these groups, like these or so. And we don't even have like a huge board process. We want to have one or two people doing stuff. This is, I think, requested word from side of conversation and then we talk about engaging individually with these sports groups, we can be both collective agreement on a number of things, but there's also going to be collective disagreement on a number of things, and there's going to be some selfish motivations. There is a plan, and I think there should be, and I would like to advocate for the idea that these sports groups, with your single representation or double representation, you can actually put together that conversations collectively, and that there would be one person having different conversations with each individual group. I think that would really behoove all the youth sports organizations to understand what representation as opposed to individual conversations. So I saw that was a question, and money was question again. What I will say is I think, listen, we interviewed the groups, and this is why I have time body here in the room. It always advocated security. That's why I had answered. And some students still doors in it. So I'm not going to get the news. Next player is town. You put 100%. I think to answer the question, it's complicated because you need to have individual meeting students. Just like that, meetings can tend to be a collective group of the youth sports groups. I don't see why that's it's a yes or no. I think it can happen if there's individual meetings. But the thing about my own thinking is what often happens is individual sports groups in this town. It's like allowance. Right? I think they are like and then was like I know it. I'm trying to be the person to say because I think it was something just groups. Because there's only so much field space so it's complicated. It's what I found in the past when we've done studies in a number of communities and trying to take the best pieces of all of them every time I do it. When you put all these sort of groups in one room, there tends to conversation kind of evolve like individual examples of something that happened in the past rather than like how do we want to do this? My preference were if the board decided they wanted to do something like that. After that individual conversations with each of them. I just want on the record that this was requested by multiple presidents. It is still going to continue to be requested by multiple presidents. So that's something we want to recommend. Usually, I think in general, this way we can from my understanding too, even like because I'm so popular. There's I have lots of it. I'm not for it's very good. But so it's the I think it's there's a lot of people in my room. It's a so I think at a time that makes sense. I think we need to have individual meetings and to that's really why these things information because I'm looking groups that don't have these students now. Only in stakeholders so I think have these in the cycle. Um John checking out our control improvement plan for the current facilities. We'll do community benchmarking, see what other communities locally to us have, see if we're not really out of skew with what other communities are doing. We'll discuss a phasing strategy. This phasing strategy will come kind of loosely with kind of more projects 1 and 2, and then talking about what 3, 4, and 5 might be in the future. When you're looking at your plan, looking into some of these athletic improvements, some may be this is a linear improvement, this is something we need to fundraise for down the road. I'm looking some high levels of looking at process that's it just not looking at really understanding what the markets need to be to learn what the things we post. It's more definitely that's one of the most productive plan after the sport, to the community, the youth groups have all said yes, I like this plan kind of moving forward. We'll have our that put together some visuals for the supportive for random people conflict but so what a potential is we went through the facility will be included up to 2 small level renders. That may be renderings of the same site, option 1, option 2, or if it's that sort of a show proposed improvements to full 42 plans. If there's some work on site visits, we'll be working with the town to understand who our stakeholders are that we're going to do our one-on-one interviews. We after that our survey. We're in the process of doing some of the different review. We'll be working on that. This next slide is just some questions we wanted to get your minds thinking on. We're going to flip back to the room to kind of get some feedback from everybody. I don't know if you're all able to read that or not, but you know, while we're in this room and we have the public here, what fields do your families use most often? Are there times when when the fields feel too crowded or unavailable? That could be both for the passive and the active. Is there times where the baseball team doesn't have the facility to play at? Or is there a time where there's passive recreation, somebody who wants to just go walk and it feels too overcrowded to do so? What improvements would make your experience better at the parks? Are there sports or activities that you don't have enough space for right now? How important is it to have lights in field hours? And are there field locations you think are unused or overlooked? So, if anybody in the community here has any of these that they want to voice an opinion on, for that matter, if they wanted to voice their opinion on about the parks or the master plan process, it'd be great to get some feedback.
It's not a huge space, it may not be feasible, but I often think the area behind the middle school is an underused area that could be.
It's on the list.
I had a question about the final recommendations. So a lot of this is infrastructure, fields, facilities. Will it also incorporate recommendations for our town leaders if there's resources that you see that we're not really following best practice or we don't have enough staff? Maintenance, I know you mentioned maintenance a little bit.
We're going to touch on maintenance. We're probably not going to do like a detailed analysis of we hadn't planned on doing a detailed analysis of staffing levels. The can something that's discussed along the way, and we may be able to get that one test if you have one staff member and you have 37 months, maybe that's not enough. We'll get that message to the staff and if the board decided we could go a little bit further, and they wanted to add an evaluation of staffing levels, we certainly have help on that.
Many of the fields don't have restrooms or water service. Would that be part of the study in terms of like?
Certainly going to identify the ones that don't, and we'll leave it up to the community and how important that is to them. We're in facilities meet those needs, and so we'll certainly probably one of our questions in some list. Do you think we did not. Is that about? You just did one. Something out. Also reasons. That's the main field. Some people proposed over this one. And ratings to the river. Being already found ways. So I have a major field like Kelly and not even basketball. Was it a full court or a half court?
Maybe would be, I think it's a very, for everyone else now, should be something organized, this is not, I mean.
There is.
That's the standard. It's a great opportunity, especially for kids who aren't enrolled in these schools. For whatever reason, we need opportunities for kids whose babies' families can't. I mean, I have a nice to be able to increase incomes, paying to this. We need to see from the best possible.
I think the argument too is. There is plans by the way to fund this renovation of this basketball court here. There's a new CPC application, right? With also you mentioned also plans for the team. So that's what's happening. So you see Andrews is going to be that One of the things I think you probably missed was that we talked about we're gonna map out the community as a whole and understand where the groups are. Maybe what I'm hearing is we should kind of subset that with like, do we have inventory in all the corners? Like, it's for things like that. Community needs to, if you look at them, it's like, probably the two biggest opportunities is to like, because it's a lower class. But I mean, it's just something that's right. Like those are the ones and mixes. Yeah, there was a list, and I think one way they flew today was the list that we gave. And then it was like, hey, here's the inventory, everything that we're looking at. So we did, pretty extensive where we include the middle school, we include like the parents and such as well. Just because every little bit of facilities. We're 10, 15 facilities that we're talking about. And so we really only know of like what 6 or 7 months, but there's other little pieces, pockets.
Is there any distinction between town fields and school fields? Like there's the midgets and stuff, or the typically I'm not great, but I'm assuming one of the school fields. And then it's another thing, it's a school fields. To that level, it's again from earlier. Really important for a lot of players, and know, and it's like we said, they've been good to a lot of organizations. We have a nice relationship with a lot of people on that end. Now might be bigger in their environment, doing stuff over there. Not necessary. So making that clear as a recording notation, I think would for the agenda. We'll do something about the way we map our facility, so it's just showing something that needs to be reported, For the school facilities, we're investing in that. For example, I know the PTO at Tucker Elementary School is talking about revamping that playground area. But I don't know whether or not, so what I will say is playgrounds, not like for schools that are small like Tucker, aren't necessarily, that's not one of the 14 pieces on this. So to North's point where Pearson's, it's their space and things, right? So that was identified as one. High school obviously clearly one because we use it a ton. What I will say though is like the CPC has funded, Cunningham, we funded Cunningham, we've funded Glover, and then I know it was acquisition. And then, so they are doing it there, but it's more specific school playgrounds, specific elementary schools. Just for that. The field behind the lever on the list.
Let's go through the list here. Andrews Limited, Mary C. Lane Field, Kelly Field, Bruce Middle School, Milton High School, Flightley Fields, Lincoln Pond Fields, Cunningham Park, Milton Academy, Curry College, Point 32 Field, Town Dump Access Site, Michelle Road, Neapontet River West. Especially I got some, so if you look at that, we went to very small, so that's not over here. Let's look at that. We should just add whatever we think that's what we're. Over field and and then Tucker's. So Tucker was just a playground, so it's a small elementary space. Yeah. The basketball court that's in Orange South very intense, so he's not saying so it's other than noting in inventory, there's nothing to analyze, is that? It's such an opportunity thing. I'm sorry, yeah, in CPC, the will say is, I think it was like 40,000 Tom, was it 40,000?
Maybe 100 and then we go, but that's not enough to get the.
It wasn't enough to remedy, you think the 40,000 was to remedy this. And then it's more for like you can't like that. I think that's a group of items, we'll hear, we're looking into ways to improve. But I also believe that it's for them, it's like more, yeah. It's also more of everything than that. It's on, you'll see as you come out of it. Also, it's just, it needs one.
Is there another one we're missing? Is there another facility we haven't thought about?
When you actually move point 32, that's first of all not in Milton and it's an agreement between the organization. And it's just verbal agreement. It's not something that we have in writing or
It's in the fast.
yeah,
It's on
no,
it's on the reuse fields.
it's not appropriate though, because they can take it away instantly. Yeah, and every season is busy.
What I'm saying to that consultant is that they yeah, they would use it for analysis to get these use criteria. It might be one of those things where I would recommend you show it as a like value of money. It's like you lost it. What we need to do is fix it.
Yeah, I wanted feel from them.
And they won't do it. They won't do verbal. Thanks to announcements.
Matter of fact, uh, would we consider the granite fields in Quincy, which are, I don't know if they're utilized. Baseball, you know, like those?
There's a long term agreement, when I just notes, where the Milton Quincy is moving connected up in that to based on how I get Quincy Youth Baseball based on the time of the film that we did this week, 2 days. So that still isn't today, only 2 days a week. It is utilized by the Milton, not 2 days a week, every single period that we get. I can speak to that, I can't speak to Quincy in terms of what it is. So I'm thinking it's not. So, I'll probably be very useful as if you see, I know, you know, some of them have to give up, so I think that is, you don't really know. So it's, this can have you reach out as a, you ask, so that's why I said, it's something that they're doing, it's something we're gonna study it, it's just like, there's inventory, because you probably don't have the space, and, you know, something, we had a field in Boston, we used it, like 2 years ago, and it was like further with members, but we didn't use it, and you know, we didn't use it to use. It's just not.
Right, I imagine when you do the one-on-one meetings, you're going to ask them, the youth organizations, what fields do they use and we identify how many fields are being used.
Absolutely. Or Milton Academy or any.
Thanks. Now we're talking about the universe of parks and like when it's included, couple of things, questions I have, I guess. I'm looking at Kelly, there's that, what is effectively a dog park? I think it's sort of also a memorial. Effectively a dog park between Kelly Field and that unused parking lot that people have referenced. I think that should be included. I don't know if there are other fields like that.
So he was.
Okay, so you're talking about on Lincoln Street, kind of McKinney's, really fields.
Yeah. Stone.
We don't think this is.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
actually sleeping in the house. It's a lot of space.
It's not legally.
Another universe question I have is playgrounds. You seem to be too that those are out of the scope of this, but is it the case with that? Seeing clearly are
I think it's the scope of this. It's because of the nothing. It's like we want to go to every elementary school and do a playground for all elementary schools. It's a good point. Like I think there are opportunities, and we do have playgrounds in just it's an area. And the one last one was one area in town and it was built in. So it's really this to get one. And so I don't see that as a huge need for the community because we have, you know, not even on so this is but it could be these.
sorry.
for example, it's a pretty big underutilized space. It could be a basketball court or two, you know, just throwing that out there because I know people have raised it. I think there's a lot of space there. I don't know. I just didn't see it on the list.
Something was I'm sorry, I missed it.
Beverly.
Oh, sorry.
Well, and to be honest, thank you. The only, like legally, Beverly Park, we just passed it at a meeting anyways, that would be, we could put a playground. It's so,
What about Andrews Park? There's that field. So like what Echo was saying, but not the playground, but that like huge field, and also Shields Park has like the
Milton
field.
Circle.
Oh, you didn't. Sorry, I didn't. Scroll down. I didn't remember. Yeah.
It's
It's- it's-
Village
is
is,
that the triangle?
those fields, yes.
Field things beyond that.
Baseball field, playgrounds. Late Street. If we didn't.
Pretty much.
We haven't been on Elliott Street.
I don't think so. Maybe we missed one in our mind. Just let's repeat, and if it's not there, we want to make sure we spot it.
Jamie has a habit.
So part of your planning, do you look at each space and understand, like, I know the GIS piece of the mapping, but how about like legally, the land part of it? There's some disagreements, agreements of different land ownership, but also like what you can do to, it's like, can you, dig it up to do sodding and, sprinklers and all that, or not? There are some agreements.
In those plans, whether we note it on the figure itself for the site, or whether we note it within the report, we want to note, I think, from, site that. We're explanation there, so anything we're gonna do is gonna be like surface improvements. I believe most websites are that way. Where there's like this school that has football fields are made for an area, here's the area. Field relations or and then note on that it's not made by the town of Milton, we can only use minor improvements. So we'll, we do find interviews to our business and with the recognition on those figures. I didn't know. It's like we probably won't lay out like legal agreements by any stretch of the imagination. We'll just try to simplify for the purposes of public.
The money for this study came from CPA. Found good money for this study, thanks to CPA, it money for the study. And when they give us final recommendation in the spring, not trying to stop breaking ground, I would like to say, money to the box. Everybody knows we just went through with this override. There's some low hanging fruit things that we can do immediately. Maybe we'll do, some of that stuff, but, the fields are not automatically gonna be, we're going to. They're gonna cost a lot of money and.
It's a lot of people. I think, it's not these guys said it's probably a 5 to 10 year plan. Probably been more than 10 years, but there's many ways that we can fund this, I think. But we need to do the study and need to do it first before we even get to it.
Yeah. And yes, we're thinking about
We're not in the first phase. Which is a little more, I mean, people have a single time have access to that. I know that there's been a good job with social media with websites that, there's our plan to put up the library and physical spaces people go as well, so they'll be able to talk about it. Reach out to the room. We should have done it. It sounds like you guys have things I'm gonna put out this time, so like things like we're gonna tonight. It's a good, whatever ways we can do to engage connect with service to see. So if we can get it on the space, we'll do social media, we get it on
I think trying to get the survey outreach, we're gonna rely on neighbors to share it with neighbors. And that's the best way for word to spread is, the neighbor we want we wanna hear from everybody, so.
So it'd be as simple as a QR code. So if you had the QR code up on your phone, you can contact someone, you can scan it, and you make this one right.
Sports teams, represented here, I'm sure that.
We're all in the field here, so, you know, there's a good fit. If you are going to survey and it's opening something today, and you know, and for these things, we can remember what to learn. We can really use all of us template that you can go one good thing from this study is that there will be a long time. Page, so as we go through this, so it's one thing.
So we've seen these, there will also be, again, in communities where you reach out to, butter through these different groups and areas that you've talked about. Studying, so they might have different, opinions about what groups of the butter, just for
No, we did not plan on reaching out to voters, and I am not in the class. With so many podcasts because you can ask questions on these surveys, but you know, speak to this on me, speak this completely field. But in multiple years of different things that certain things happen well, and certain things not. So without that historical context, I think we can explain maybe we don't want to spend money, but if you've got that information from folks, we want to better this by the way. I think it's extremely helpful. It will save your time in the long run. You might be filling in a few ditches, or you know, to use Kelly as an example, since many of us know from that area, was that was filled in with the old space used to be. It was never no grass, it's just slept. There's now there are ditches in that area. It could be, you know, somebody walking by and fall into the ditch. I know neighbor who's in Milton got started one time. So these are issues and maybe smaller improvements would help rather than having people feel where these things please. Those improvements would help, but you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you ask the abutters to walk through there every single thing. So I would encourage that abutters, I think it's important, you'll also make people feel. So we're gonna have to really look at this. So everybody who's in the community can go be specific or in everybody's house. You don't think it can this plan. No, I'm not saying that, but I do think I mean if you live next to the field, chances are you've had experience with it in many ways that many others don't. Just like the folks who are there for the sports and doing this for the fields, they're not experiencing any of this stuff. They're not necessarily have so I would urge that, I would really much really suggest that please entertain people's questions because not everyone has that ability. I'm saying if not yours, I'm happy to do that. You know, reach out to one or two of us that you know in that area and let us go and do that because we'll have space in this, you know. So you may not want, you know, the dog department, you know, something like that. That would be an issue for a lot of folks. So please, we highly encourage to do that.
And when we met with time on, we made it very clear how important having neighbor feedback was and how they can really make a really good project. And so very aware getting input from neighbors, especially others. Is important.
Those are things that I brainstorm with the rec commission on what the best way to approach that, and we'll come back with a way to I think electronically we can analyze easily. Look at some ideas.
You buy a house near a park, what do you expect? Yeah.
Yes, that it was. Various chambers.
I just wanna, to reiterate that I really like to know that you have a clear plan for outreach beyond sports teams, because you had said earlier in the presentation, you have 8 people saying one thing and one person says another. You don't want to say, I mean, that weight is just kind of the accident of who's responding. And so putting some effort into the outreach plan, how you get the survey, the news of the survey out beyond. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's a field heavy thing and the sports teams are super important for this and for our kids. But there are a lot of other interesting parties and I think it's gonna take more
you know, your plan for how you're gonna reach into the community associations and getting activated and butters to go around, making sure maybe you stop by the COA or something like that. I think it's gonna be really important for getting around it. Yeah, the town, and if there's a danger, I think of it being really expensive. I mean, you know,
Want to make sure it's being presented to the entire.
yeah.
There's some other hand up. Is anyone on the end? Is anyone on the end who's?
That was the question.
Conversation of threat, the term mechanism for capturing unintended uses of the fields. and consequences. That's a very big word about the dog park thing, I don't know about. But fields, kids, dogs that off leash all the time, digging holes, really detrimental to the field. Just the way that that's going to be captured in certain questions or really specific to so I do think it's important to note, like, there may be a general comment section in our survey where things like that, resident historical knowledge can come out. And it'll be, you can make it paragraphs long, write photos if you have photos and stuff to that effect, but we'll wanna have. We'll wanna get that feedback on dog, whether there's dogs using the fields, I think we recommend. One, we can say, even get some signs up to say, no dogs on leashes, park, some communities doing dogs on the park. Or maybe, eventually try to say, there were signs, a lot of things, people are using the fields. Maybe the community wants to take about dog based on. Where.
Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Parks Department is pretty aware of what fields experience.
Side. Enforcement. Senate doesn't have to sign. That's the thing, right? We could fence in the fields, I mean, field fencing now, got it. I'm sure a lot of people would be. If we had some field in fact, some.
I just wanna see if it's gonna be kind of. Some of the other signs talk.
It's good feedback, that's something to be on it, this isn't sport, this isn't. This is sports focused, so it needs to be fun community, and so. We'll do our best, I think there's a lot of people in this room, tonight even, it's not fully, it's not. So, we'll continue to work with as much as possible, to get as many people as engaged.
One of your questions was around lights and, using lights as we're going to extend our fields and our spaces, courts, trails and everything much longer. How early the sun sets in much of the year. So I think that would be a great question for the survey for our butters and our community members. I'm a newer to the community, but I run the MIT Athletic Center and we run programs till 11 p.m. to be able to, allow all of our sports teams to activate. So I think it'd be a good question to know if that's important to the community, but if also, incorporate the butters feedback on having lights in there.
Sure. Yeah. The only thing that I know is really the high school, right? It has lights now, was a good CPC project, it was an expensive project, I think an LED lighting in for, I don't know, another one, it's first teams. We can utilize some of this for work too. So, it's a good thing, you can imagine it. Yeah, this feels kind of secluded. You put that in Andrews or like that's you have a number from the Union Park. If I was a resident that would be a park that had lights on till 11 or 12 at night, I might not be too happy. So
That's why I said maybe put it in the survey so we can
I think that's.
either feedback, because I'm afraid, but also would it impact everybody's quality of life.
It was not gonna. So it's nice around the house, it's also completely sort of vacant. That's a point too, it's like, there's this little guy that just sits there and like, we do use it, you use it, yeah. It's used for
Because the hybrid, what's the storage as well?
It's remains in the storage and used.
It's the only. It's so storage. Storage. Just and it's a pretty safe way. They can put in storage on site, just not the building. Yeah. I think the point of this planning anyway is we know we have a finite amount of but we're not gonna one thing with we don't we're over programmed that other programs are going there's no space. That's why we're going to Canton for fine field, we're going to Boston, we're going to Quincy, wherever. So the idea is what can we do currently with what we have? Again, looking at 50 states, which are really only looking potentially depending on the other thing is there's a good last one. So that so the local groups are owns really nicely right now. But if they build a new school, it may get swapped out, which is one thing really kind of bad because that's the way it's not swapped out. That's it's a going right because it's a it's a
or another one. Not necessarily tied to fields, but in any communities, do you ever study like auxiliary uses at these fields? I'm thinking like covered pavilions for people to gather and team or have there's a after before sports.
inventory. I'm also gonna make basic notes about it. Doesn't look like it's falling apart unless you rotted. Trees that are holding it up. There are angles that have fallen off of it. These are just some of the general um, things we'll note about it. We don't make very specific recommendations.
I can recommend like this group could use this facility.
It's something usually will come out of a we would recommend that unless we're doing like if we're going to rebuild the park. So like this park is a really good field space. And but it's oriented all wrong. It should never been built this way. Everything's super old. I'm just saying it's one of those parks here. I'm just an example. Let's rebuild the whole thing. And then when we reimagine that space, certainly we would look at doesn't need a pavilion, but if we look at a park and there's baseball fields and we can do baseball teams and they don't need a pavilion, and the community doesn't have a need for a pavilion, we're probably won't recommend a pavilion. Um, it kind of is a principle when understanding towns all have purpose and we can't spend endless amounts of dollars. Now that being said, just because it's not in the master plan doesn't mean that when it gets to the next funding stage, the master plan is not or locked in stone. We can't do anything about what's in this plan. To give the town a general idea of what the roadmap looks like ahead. When the town goes to get funding, if the funding's available, if the funding is needed for the we still needed to reorient it or move so it's something to we can work on this is like at the end of it, we can focus on 1, 2, 3 spots, right? Or looking like little tiny projects, but at least let's keep in mind. We'll break it up immediately. Here's the just to touch on a couple of things. Don't want to make people feel full of athletic lighting. Talk about maybe being on to 11 o'clock. The lighting industry's come a really long way. They can do even with light spill. So they also have free program lighting fixture to shut off and then the town says. And so if the town says that light fixture shuts off at 9 infields are done, then the light fixture shuts off at 9, but it can extend your field from 5 o'clock at night to 9 o'clock. So if the community and the abutters are concerned that this thing's gonna be playing all night, and we need to advocate for what kind would be acceptable for features, if you're sustainable with lighting. Another comment that I made, or that was made earlier was about playgrounds. I just want to be clear. We'll certainly will inventory playgrounds. We're not going to make safety assessment of each of these playgrounds. It's a really specific skill set that people have to understand like for these things and film protections. And if there was something that the community was concerned about, we would reference something. Like I said, we pretty much they read it. There was a Milton playground plan was the whole room and I except this one. Okay. Just to clarify one, so obviously we're focused on the fields. So you're not gonna look at right, like brick trail or if it's like a recreational trail, we're not gonna talk about it. If it's in the field and it's like a walking trail,
And I think also, yeah, one thing that we always use expense too, but I would always go back to the community and say, "Hey, what are plans? What do you see difference that you enjoy?" Like whether it's in Milton or we go, I always say, the little kids, I would go down there and I'm like, it's beautiful. There's a track, there was a soccer field. They're it's one park that uses the town, right? It's not that they have a ton of money to do it. Anybody who's gone there, it's a good but they incorporates not just sports, they incorporates landscape, it incorporates track and walking pieces on that. So there's many information with it. So
I just have a quick naive question about this master plans and everything else. I mean, when you sort of, do you follow them afterwards? Like, as the plans are made, like, how much of plans do towns end up implementing using? How does that end up? Working? How much variation?
different communities, right? Active communities like we see tonight have a much greater tendency to follow up on these master plans. Most people are invested in what was put in that. One of the examples I showed you earlier, where we were talking about field usage versus field availability, when the town in New York, that community is now on its fifth phase of the master plan. They continue to build out, and there are more land that wasn't previously part of our master plan. We're probably getting ready to revisit that one. Other communities will take a look at our master plan and they go, oh my goodness, that's so much funding that we didn't have a plan for. It's gonna sit in for 5 years. We've got to wait till some other larger investment we made comes off the, then we can. We'll away the small stuff. So, it's a give and take with community financing and what's available out there for grant funding. But after the communities tend to partner with following up on them.
And the durability of the plans that you make, and you can just sort of keep there, and how much variability is there when it gets done?
It's always so hard to just, it'll depend on a bunch of things. Does the road commission, stay the same during, if we have a 5-year or 10-year planning horizon, hopefully all these folks are still with us. But maybe someone new comes on the board and has different ideas about what we should do. Or, there's a million ways which these plans can change. I like to say they have like 5 years before we should revisit them. Because some things may change. I'm not saying you need to rewrite the whole master plan, but you may say, priorities the same today as they were 5 years ago. And then you can know whether the master plan needs to, I don't know, not completely redone, but re-engaged. I'll just give you an example from the CPC. When we've been in the CPC, we've always been proponent of planning. Good planning leads to good. So if we have a good process in planning and a really good community engagement, then we would hold it. Build up behind it, and then you can engage and so read. So one reason never disclaims to lab looking at the workflow space. I think there's something within the scope of this effort to make recommendations on functional and the main participation, so it feels don't get overwork. The answer. We're not together now. We have in the past. The problem with that being said is every field speaks up differently, every field develop ability to support uses will depend on a lot of things that we may not get in totality out of the study. So like when I look at a field's ability to support a use, what it would depend on is, does it have proper irrigation? What's its construction made out of? Does it have drainage? And also who's using it? Is it a high school user using it? Or is it a PE kids using it with shoes on? Is it football that's on it? How does all dogs chewing up the irrigation system? Is it flooded with geese is another one that can be problematic for fields. So we try not to ever say it's an exact science. We try to give tools in the report that a lot of the folks that maintain the facilities what a field should look like and what it shouldn't look like, so that when it does arise and it's getting overused, they can make the call to say, hey guys, we need to rotate this field, we need to shut this one down for a little bit, we just need a month to get it to come back. Keeping fields is not like you can't do the same thing every year. This year, we're not from this area, but we're from every weekend. and some fields are doing really well right now. Another year, it could rain, it could not rain for 6 months, and all these fields could look like deserts right now. And so it's not something you can say, you know, year in, year out, it's capable of supporting in summer uses. It's gonna have to be this year, it's capable of this next uses. And just the way that it feels like really feel something sure it's been worse. And it's been the one that's been on roller. And it's an asset. So the maintenance on that is huge too. So you have to come up with this field. So just take that on. So plan all that time. Any other questions? No one online? No one online for meetings? Oh, I think thank you guys for your participation. I didn't expect this big of a group or this active of questions, so this was great on our end to kind of get this initial feedback. If we want to take this back and we'll process it and probably look into these guys and say, hey, what do you think about these couple of tweaks in our approach? Make sure we're keeping you and doing the things you guys want, and then we'll get started again, and certainly we'll be posting on the website what our, after we complete our assessments and when next time we want to engage the public, we'll be reaching out to. I think whatever way we can make this outreach more, we'll do it. I think it's really important that I appreciate everyone's feedback. And it's all important. So we'll really get as much engagement as we can, and we'll work the time on to ways to do it. If someone has an idea, should we reach out to the rec commission and say, so Bonnie has an email on, and so you can reach out to her with any follow-up questions, and all of our emails are connected as well, and you can reach out to us.
Yeah, I think any feedback on how residents think we can do the best job communicating, especially the online survey, to get out to as many people. If we want to have to rely on people's words to get this right.
Like that, this work from that, the neighborhood associates to me too. So if we got one contact at a neighborhood association, we get split all the time. So whatever way we can get people to reach, we just.
Several questions submitted by.
Yeah.
Did he answer those? I didn't really follow up.
Yeah, so there were very specific questions about certain improvements. I think one was in regards to tennis courts and stuff like that. Drainage, yes. The drainage concern about the field, and then I think one about maybe an indoor facility. And so all of that will be looked at during the process. We don't have answers for any of those things right now, but certainly we'll get back to those. Indoor facility. There was a list of things that they thought might be, and certainly we can review that before.
Summer night.
Right.